Good evening, everyone, and I must say, I'm David Elwood, Dean of the John F. Kennedy School of Government, and I'd say this is just about one of the most exciting days I've had a chance to be a part of. It's very much my pleasure to welcome you here to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum for the 2006 Albert H. Gordon Lecture. Now, I want to give you a little bit of background about Mr. Gordon and the lecture and a few other things before we turn to our very special guest. The lectureship was established by the benefiction of the philanthropist Albert Gordon in 1987. The lecture is actually a reflection of the interest of Mr. Gordon in matters of finance and public policy, and with special attention to internationalization issues. He was an eminent graduate of Harvard College, class of 1923, and alumnus of Harvard Business School. He is the founder and former chairman of Kidder, Peabody & Company, and he's been a great friend of Harvard over the years, having served on the Board of Overseers, Committee on University Resources. He's really a truly remarkable man, as any of you who have met him know. Unfortunately, he's not able to be with us here this evening, but it's a great pleasure to continue on in this tradition. Madam President, you should know that a number of people, including George Herbert Walker Bush, Robert Dole, David Rockefeller, Javier Solano, Joaquim Chissano, all have been Gordon lecturers, so this is a very great honor for us to have you here. Now, in a moment, I'll turn this over to Mary Jo Bain, but I want to say a couple of words about several other folks that were deeply involved in this activity. First, and most importantly, I want to talk about the Women in Politics and Women in the Institute of Politics, which I thank them for their remarkable activities, but most especially the Women in Public Policy program, for hosting this event, along with the International Rescue Committee of Boston. Now, special thanks go to Ambassador Swanee Hunt. Where is Swanee, by the way? There she is, right there. She is responsible for a large part of pulling us all together and so forth, so let's just give her a hand. She's also the director of the Women in Public Policy program. She, along with the Women in Public Policy program, have been an important liaison to Liberia, having traveled there as a guest of President Johnson Sirleaf this spring, and very, very involved. She originally connected through the Women in Public Policy program and through their work on women and security, and she's been, the Women in Public Policy program has been a vital part of both rigorous and effective analysis and examination of issues involving women, but also supporting and reinforcing the efforts of women in elected office as well as other activities. Next, I'd also like to thank the International Rescue Committee. The IRC has been a global leader in humanitarian aid for nearly 75 years, focusing on refugees and others uprooted or affected by conflict and oppression. Today, the IRC is aiding more than 12 million people in 25 countries, ranging from Darfur to the tsunami regions, even to Hurricane Katrina. And even in Boston, they have helped since 1979 more than 13,000 refugees. It's my very great honor also to thank the International Rescue Committee. Now, protocol and my deep desires would normally have me making the introduction to our very esteemed special guest. But protocol sometimes needs to be ignored. And in this particular case, we have a new academic dean, Mary Jo Bain, seated on my right. She has a remarkable number of distinctions. She has served in government at various levels, state and federal. She has, whether it's in education, she's been the head of human services for the state of New York. She's worked in Washington on welfare reform. She's been a school teacher. But I think unquestionably, in her mind, the most significant event, the most important work she's ever done was serve as a Peace Corps worker in Liberia. And so it is my very great honor to introduce Mary Jo Bain, who will introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you, David. It is an enormous honor and privilege for me to introduce our distinguished guest tonight, a privilege, by the way, for which I pulled all the strings I could find with David and Swanee and the Institute of Politics. I was in the Peace Corps in Liberia from 1963 to 1965. At that time, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was starting her family and working in the Ministry of Finance in Liberia. William Vakanarak Shadrach Tubman was beginning the 20th year of a 37-year presidency of Liberia. The years since that time were momentous ones for Liberia and for Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. In 1979, she became the first female Minister of Finance of Liberia, where she worked to curb the mismanagement of government finances. In 1980, William Tolbert, the last of the true Whig Party presidents, was overthrown in a bloody coup, beginning Liberia's more than 20 years of tragedy. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf spent time in jail and was forced into exile. During her years in exile, she served as Assistant Administrator and Director of the Regional Bureau of Africa for the United Nations Development Program, where she held the rank of Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations. She also spent time as a senior loan officer at the World Bank and served as an initial member of the World Bank Council of African Advisors. She made an enormous impact on the world during that period, dealing with the issues which motivate this Gordon lecture, issues of internationalization, issues of finance. In addition to her distinguished service in the public sector, President Sirleaf has served on the advisory board of the Modern Africa Growth and Investment Corporation and the Hong Kong Bank Group. She also served as vice president of Citicorp's Africa Regional Office. 1997, she returned to Liberia to run, sadly, unsuccessfully, for president at the Unity Party's candidate in the first post-war elections in Liberia, which did not bring an end to Liberia's tragedy. An alumna of the Madison Business College in Wisconsin, the Economics Institute at the University of Colorado, and a source of enormous pride for us here, a 1971 graduate of the Kennedy School's mid-career program in public administration. Her studies and her experience have equipped her well for her latest and most significant challenge, leading Liberia into a peaceful, productive, and new future. She was inaugurated as the 23rd president of Liberia on January 16th of this year. Last July, she marked the first Independence Day celebration in her presidency by turning on the electricity in Monrovia in its public spaces, bringing light to Liberia. There could be no more fitting symbol. So please join me in welcoming an extraordinarily brave and accomplished woman, recognized by the world as a beacon of hope in Africa, loved by her people as Ma Ellen, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Dean Elwood, members of the faculty, students, some of my compatriots whom I see in the room, special guests, friends. I'm pleased to be back on this campus and to have been invited to follow a sterling group to do the Albert Gordon Lecture on Finance and Public Policy. I'm even more pleased to do so as the first democratically elected president of an African country. As some may know, not too many of you young ones in the room, I sharpened my political tooth right here in the early 1970s by spending long hours in the stacks, deepening my knowledge of my country, and joining the Vietnam protest movement in your country. Ambassador Swanee Hunt, I thank you for the effort in getting me here today. I thank you for the work of the Women in Public Policy, Women Waging Peace, and all those interventions that have helped us along the way. I consider my presence here not only an honor to me, but a tribute to the women of Africa in general, and those of Liberia in particular. The women of my country have demonstrated throughout the years of our national tragedy that they are determined to keep on living, struggling, and searching for their dignity in the midst of some of the most horrendous horrors that mankind has witnessed. In this public forum, I salute the women of Liberia for their courage, steadfastness, and determination to carry on when all seemed lost in the darkest moment in our nation's history. For the past 2 decades, the world has come to know Liberia as a land of political comedy, widespread corruption, and unimaginable brutality that have sapped the potential of our people and made a mockery of the efforts of our forefathers to build a nation wherein the people of our race would find refuge from the uncertainties of nature and the humiliation and degradation of bondage. Our country became the strange footage that flickered on television screens with all the terrible images of savagery. Our people became refugees and fled to all corners of the globe for shelter. It was a period of darkness and insanity. The origins of the Liberian conflict can be traced back to the various forms of exclusion and marginalization which characterized Liberia for most of its existence as a country. At the socio-political level, poor governance and constrained integration have been critical problems. The founding constitution, for example, was designed for the needs of the settler population, who subjected the indigenous people. Political power was concentrated essentially in Monrovia and principally at the presidency. The over-concentration of power in a closed political system bred corruption, restricted access to decision-making processes, limited the space for civil society participation in the processes of governance, and fueled ethnic and class animosities and rivalries. The exclusion and marginalization extended to the economy as well. In the early days, land and property rights of the majority of Liberians were severely limited. Later, marginalization was perpetuated by the urban bias policies of successive administrations. For instance, most of the infrastructure and basic services were concentrated in Monrovia, the capital city, fueling uneven development and a dualistic economy with a major dichotomy between urban and rural areas. Marginalization of youth and women, gross mismanagement, and perceived inequalities in the distribution of benefits from natural resources were also major problems. These realities and dependence of the nation on a small range of natural resources complicated the situation and eventually sowed the seeds that fueled the 14-year conflict. More specifically, on the economic front, Liberia's history has been checkered. From a steady but lopsided growth in the 1950s and 60s, the economy tumbled to total impulsion at the dawn of the 21st century. Buoyed by President William Tubman's open-door policy and unification policy in the 1940s, Liberia's economy registered an annual growth rate of 4 to 7% that persisted in the 50s and into the 60s. The foundation of this economic growth was the adoption of policy of granting concessions to foreign interests for the exploitation of natural resources such as iron ore, rubber, and timber. Under this policy, foreign direct investment increased significantly with the establishment of mining concessions and the expansion of large rubber plantations by large American conglomerates such as Republic Steel and Firestone. With the prices of rubber and iron ore high on the world market, only Liberia witnessed a period of economic boom. However, the boom benefited only a few of the elite, and expansion of physical and social infrastructure largely excluded the rural areas. In the groundbreaking first overall assessment of the Liberian economy, a Northwestern University team report in the early 1970s described the Liberian economy as growth without development. As expected over time, the economy could not sustain its impressive growth record on account of a number of external and internal factors. Decline in the price of primary commodities, sharp increase in the price of fuel, and reliance on petroleum refinancing took its toll. By 1978, all indicators pointed to a looming crisis. Unemployment and consumer prices, food prices in particular, rose at alarming rates. The lack of a long-term vision and the absence of an effective short-term response to the onset of the economic stagnation coincided with political repression, social exclusion, and corruption in high places, thus accelerating the gathering storm of crises that were later to engulf the nation. The coup d'etat of April 1980 and the resulting flight of human and financial capital coincided with the continued fall in prices of primary goods in the international markets, together with a decline in capital investment, all of which precipitated a sharp decline in the economy. At the start of the Civil War in 1990 and up to its ending in 2003, external assistance took the form of emergency relief as the country descended into a scene of humanitarian disaster, the full scale and implications of which have yet to be wholly assessed. Commercial and productive activities ceased as various warlords looted and vandalized the resources of the country. Traditional system of governance broke down. The economy crashed as prices soared. The local currency depreciated significantly from parity with the US dollar to 60 for $1. Illicit trade in diamonds and timber flourished, massive exodus of skills and talents from the country. The nation's basic and critical infrastructure was systematically destroyed by this conflict. In effect, both the economy and the state collapsed. Today, Liberia is at a critical juncture of its political and socio-economic development as a nation. We face some of the most acute economic and social circumstances for any post-conflict country. This results from the 25 years of political instability, including the devastating Civil War, gross mismanagement for much of our national existence. Today, well over 3/4 of our people live below the poverty line of $1 a day. About half live in abject poverty at 50 cents per day. An overwhelming majority of our people, mainly the youth, are either unemployed or employed in the informal sector as a result of the shrinkage of the formal sector. International sanctions imposed on trading of our labor-intensive activities in diamond and forestry products have added to the difficulties. Of the small proportion of the population employed in the formal sector, most are in the public sector, itself now right-sizing on efficiency and cost-effective grounds. Physical infrastructure across the country have been destroyed or seriously dilapidated. It is within this fragile political, social, and economic context that my administration takes over the management of our economy. We know that we must quickly consolidate the potential dividends of Liberia's hard-won peace and arrest the economic and financial hemorrhaging. We know that we must respond to the deep wounds of the Civil War and enhance national governance, while quickly introducing new measures of structural reforms and reconstruction. The records show that post-conflict countries often go back to war, especially in Africa. This regression is often a consequence of new governments' inability to respond to post-conflict challenges. In Liberia, these challenges are daunting, ranging from the breakdown in social norms, massive unemployment, destruction of infrastructure. In response, our government is attempting to formulate a conflict-sensitive development strategy with interventions that aim at addressing the structural causes of conflict, while at the same time ensuring that development contributes to peace building. We consider poverty reduction strategies to be at the core of this conflict-sensitive lens in order to avoid a return to conflict. On the other hand, our government is resolved on ensuring that the pre-war Liberia, which led us to conflict, will not be recreated. As such, the government is committed to doing business differently, to move the country from conflict to peace and on to development. To this end, government is determined to build a new economy with equal opportunities for all. Thus, our government embarked upon a 150-day action plan with a multifaceted strategy anchored on 4 pillars. The first of these is national security, which involves the restructuring, reorganization, training, and development of a new national army, police, and other security services. In this process, the United States is playing the lead role. While these national structures are under formation, a 15,000-strong United Nations military and police force are providing the muscle for our national security. The second is governance. Under this strategy, we are rebuilding national governing institutions, the legislature, judiciary, and the executive. We are pressing a regime of probity and accountability, fighting corruption, and ensuring that the resources of our country are effectively and efficiently used to change the lives of our people. Pillar 3 is the pursuit of economic revitalization, by which we wish to attract domestic and foreign investment, to put our economy back to work, and to reduce unemployment. The fourth pillar is infrastructure development, the catalyzing element in all that we do. We seek to provide electric power and safe drinking water to the majority of our people. We seek to build or repair roads, highways, and bridges. We seek to rehabilitate hospitals and clinics, and more importantly, schools, universities, and training institutions throughout the country. We want to provide literacy training for our market women and others in the informal sector so that they too can read and write. Despite the many constraints encountered, including low capacities and lack of adequate funding, we're pleased to say that 70% of our desired results were achieved during these first 150 days. Starting from where that plan ended, we are now preparing our interim poverty reduction strategy, which will articulate policy interventions to be pursued by the government over the period July 2006 through December 2007. The main policy of this strategy is to move our people out of poverty. Our efforts shall be guided by the consolidating of progress under the key principles established during the first 150 days, consolidating and maintaining national peace and security, facilitating and stimulating economic growth, ensuring effective governance and the rule of law, and delivering basic services to the majority of the people. Let me point out how some of the things that we include in this national renewal and reconstruction agenda. Reflecting on the recent past of our country and the long years of destabilization, polarized militarism, we need and we are determined to pursue a peaceful and secure Liberia. To achieve this, we must double our efforts to train our forces, not just in security matters, but also being accountable to the people. We must develop a clear national security strategy that will take into account the gradual withdrawal of the United Nations peacekeepers. To promote and sustain this objective, we have completed the total deactivation of members of our army, and we are well into recruiting a new army comprising 2,000 soldiers who will be adequately trained, educated, and well-equipped. Second, as we move to jumpstart our economy and growth sectors, as the economy gathers momentum, we intend to enhance the potential to see rapid growth in agriculture, both in food and cash crops. We also should see rapid growth in our forestry, mining, and other natural resource-based industries so that we create an environment that will encourage investment in activities in which Liberia can compete internationally and thereby lead to activities that will create jobs for our people. We also hope in the process of working with our creditors to address the huge external debt that is strangulating our growth efforts, recognizing that an 800% debt stock to GDP and 3,000% to export earnings is simply non-sustainable. Hence, we have embarked upon a staff monitoring program with the support of the IMF, which should lead us to the HIPIC intervention and on to some debt relief that enable us to access the resources of important bilateral and multilateral institutions. In the area of democratic governance, we intend to continue to address the overconcentration of power and a closed political system, to continue our work to address corruption, to broaden the space for civil society participation in the processes of governance, and to also work through statutory and policy changes to remove those constraints on democracy and development. We are determined to fight corruption, which has eaten away the fabrics of our nationhood and society. Anti-corruption strategy laws are currently being enacted, while an aggressive civil service watchdog performs its function. The fourth element of our forward-looking agenda in revitalizing our fiscal and infrastructure is education, which must be central to our objective of renewal and reconciliation if we are to meet our development challenges. Our education of vision for all, education for all, young and old, demands that we introduce literacy programs, demands that we respond to the needs of our market women, demands that we support universal free primary education for all of our young people. The long years of neglect dealt a lethal blow to our higher institutions of learning. They too need to be revamped to improve the quality and competitiveness of those graduates that come out of those institutions. In the long run, we would like to see a decentralization of our University of Liberia, the only state-owned higher institution of higher learning, so that they too might extend their services to our youths across the country. As in the case of education, we also intend to work on health facilities that have been partially or completely destroyed, to improve our social infrastructure, such as water and sanitation facilities. We are working to provide reliable electricity throughout our major urban areas and in rural areas on the basis of options that will be provided through the power sector survey that is being undertaken. You mentioned about turning the lights on in 26. Wasn't it a joy for young people for the first time to be able to see street lights and to be able to study under those lights, something they'd never experienced before? Wasn't it a joy to see young children turn on the taps in a few homes and see water coming out of a tap, something they never thought possible, for they thought water only came out of a bucket? Let me say that our overall mission is to make government work again, to be able to be more responsive in delivering quality service to the Liberian people. In this regard, there's a critical need for forging and building strategic partnerships. We are thankful for the continued support and assistance we've received over the years from the United States, from the European Commission, collectively, and from individual member countries of that union, as well as from our sister African countries, particularly Nigeria and Ghana. As we engage in enhancing these partnerships, we'll continue to improve our capacities and mechanisms to strengthen donor support coordination harmonization, and disbursement of funds, to deepen our work with partners in formulating and adjusting our strategies, programs, and policy priorities. Ultimately, we hope that as confidence grows in our ability to manage our economy effectively, we will benefit from donors' direct budgetary support so as to strengthen national ownership and management of our budgetary process. In summary, the strategic inventions within the 4 pillars will be guided by the principles of social and political inclusion and participation of all Liberians, irrespective of ethnicity, religion, and class. Members of the Harvard family, your institution is renowned for the countless disquisitions put out and propounded by some of the most brilliant minds of academia. Your scholars have fashioned theories that influence the minds of millions around the world. In the early 1970s, you provided a team to Liberia to help us grapple with the theories of development, with a formula that would reverse our conditions of growth without development. Nevertheless, the search that informed my participation in political life of my country has left me convinced that Africa's problems have more to do with the quality of its leadership than the scarcity and undercapacity of its human capital. I'm convinced from this search that Africa's backwardness and the continent's decline has been due to a tragic case of asset stripping of its leadership potential through wars, genocide, exile, and brutal repression. My persistence in remaining in the political arena over 30 years is with a strong desire to serve our people who we know deserve better than that which they have received in our recent history. The confidence reposed in me by our people by a decisive margin in the second round of the election is to help them fulfill their dreams of a stable and prosperous country. The hope and expectations generated by that election is not only because I come from a gender that has been marginalized in Africa, but because we offered a vision that excited the imagination of our people and allowed them to dream and to hope again. We won because the Liberian people believe that we can make a difference in the quality of their lives. A lot has been done to start the process. After 8 months in office, we have redefined Liberia's engagement with the international community. Our country is no more seen as the pestiferous nuisance of the sub-region. International newspapers no more pillory us to a disbelieving world. We have been able to put into place the mechanisms to move toward the fulfillment of our agenda. We have vowed to do all of those things to keep the promises that we made during our campaign. We today witness the return of thousands of our people from refugee camps in the region. We are working hard to integrate them. We are taking action to seek relief from our debt, to revitalize the economy, to establish sound financial and economic paradigms, and implement policies that will lead us to transparency and accountability. We are directing our people to the agriculture sector to feed themselves and strengthen the agriculture base for the transformation of rural areas. We are encouraging trade and investment. Our first budget, although minuscule considering the task at hand, give the largest priority to education and health. We hope to increase vastly the resources in these areas in our next budget. Finally, we recognize that our one world requires, in this age of rapid globalization and technological advancement, the universality of shared values. We are thus attempting to identify those systems that represent the unifying threads between all of our people, and those ideas and concepts that have united mankind throughout the ages, the variables of liberty, dignity, and enlightenment that have remained constant throughout the centuries. We are glad that our nation has been blessed to be in a position to pursue these goals. I'm glad that I have the opportunity to lead the effort that will move us from the crisis of the past to the opportunity of the present. We are committed as a people to build a new Liberia from the ashes of an old, turbulent, and tragic past to a future of hope and promise. I thank you.
President Sirleaf is willing to answer questions, and we have perhaps 20 minutes for questions. As is our practice, we would ask people who want to ask a question to come to one of the 4 microphones, 2 on the floor and 2 in the balcony. And please to remember that the most effective questions are those which are brief and concise and which end with a question mark. I would also ask you, before you ask your question, to please identify yourself. I want to turn for our first question, though, to Ambassador Swanee Hunt, the Director of the Women in Policy Program here at the Kennedy School, who has been the hostess for President Sirleaf today.
Thank you. Wow. Bravo. I was sitting there thinking, this is what a president should look like. And and then I thought, I happen to know that you got married when you were a 17-year-old girl, and you had 4 sons before you went to college. And I was sitting there trying to put all this together, and I'm wondering if I'm thinking about your tribute to the women of Liberia. Does being a woman in any way shape your style of governance or your priorities?
Thank you, Swanee. I get asked that question in so many ways, in so many times. I will answer by putting my answer the reverse of the way I always put it, by saying that, yes, being a woman makes a difference. Because I think I bring to the responsibility and the task some extra sensitivity that only a woman would have. That's it. The other part of my answer is, don't forget, I'm a professional and I'm a technocrat who happens to be a woman.
Aloha. My name is Ari Cole. I'm a physician from Hawaii and Massachusetts, and I wanted to say God bless you, Madam President. We are so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm a mid-career student here at the Kennedy School, and my question is, you've been doing a whole lot for a long time. How can we, as Kennedy students, move forward after we leave here to do ethical, moral, good work for the people of the world and our country?
Do what Desiree did. She came out. She spent 6 weeks, just about. She spent 6 weeks with us as an intern, working in our National Investment Commission, helping to look at investment incentive code and contracts and all that thing. Come out, welcome you and all the others that are in this room who can find a week or 2 or 3 weeks to come and join us and improve upon our national capacity. That's how you can help.
Hi, my name is Brad, and I just started as a freshman here at the college. And I want to thank you very much again for coming. And as world leaders go, you seem to be a very competent and hands-on political leader. And my question is this: how can Harvard as a university in the United States, through our elected officials, identify leaders like you who come from these countries that have had a very troubled history of bad leadership, as you said before, of mismanaged leadership? How can we find good leaders like you to lead countries that need that leadership?
I won't share your comments with the other leaders. I think increasingly we're seeing a number of good leaders. I think, the evolution that's taking place in much of the world, the technological and communication revolution that exposes bad leaders so quickly, that provides information on what's going on in the country, throughout the world, even sometimes before it spreads within the country itself. It's almost forcing people to change their leadership style and their habits. And it's also creating young leaders who have the capacity and the commitment to do it. So if you look around, I think you'll see that there's an increasing new crop of leadership that are coming, being able to stop the wars and conflicts so that countries, particularly underdeveloped countries, do not lose their leadership potential through people that go into exile, will certainly increase the pool of potential of good leaders. And so it's not as bad as it was. I think the future looks good for a new crop of good leaders just right across the world, but particularly in the developing countries in Africa.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks for coming here tonight. My name is Jose, and I come from another country with a woman as a president, from Chile, Michelle Bachelet. And she is advocating for a law which will make large private companies and top public positions to split their top executive positions among men and women in halves, basically. And my question is, do you support that kind of measure? And my second question is, what measures are you taking to foster gender equality?
For
gender equality.
Yeah. First, the quota system is something that has worked well in some places, and we've not adopted that. Just saying that all positions should be 50% women, 50% men, probably is not the better way to go. I think we want to improve the competitiveness of women so that they are able to get out there and win it without it. Although there's something to be said, for places where quotas have worked as an affirmative action intervention to redress many years of disadvantages. But it shouldn't just be that alone. If it's quota, it should be targeted, it should be specific, to redress this imbalance and then improve upon. The more important thing then is to create the critical mass of women that have the abilities, that can compete effectively in all areas of endeavor. And I tell you, in our country, in Africa, it starts with education. Just granting more educational opportunities to women, because women get married too young. Most times, if there's the opportunity for schooling and there's a boy and a girl, the boy gets the priority. How do we ensure that equality so that they can, in fact, have opportunity to reach their potential by getting as much education as they can? How can we help because they have children early? What kind of support systems can we get so that they don't have to interrupt their educational pursuit? Those are the things. In my country, we're trying to, to improve just to equal opportunity for all. Like I say, market women learning to read and write, making sure young girls are in school, making sure that we see more and more of them having access to educational facilities and training opportunities and skills building so that they can. And some results are showing.
Madam President, thank you very much for coming. My name is Sarah Maka. I'm an MPP2 at the Kennedy School from Nigeria. And I just want to thank you very much for being a pace setter for African women reaching the apex of in politics. My question is, what advice would you give regarding politics and management in Africa for me, a future president of my country?
Well, come to Liberia, going to establish something. Political Ambition 201. No, I think what you're doing is the best thing right now, sharpening your skills, preparing yourself. And then after that, you've got to also strengthen your resolve. If you want it, you got to be ready to go for it. And that will mean consistency, perseverance, determination, keeping your eye on the goal that you want, and being prepared, to suffer a little bit too. In African politics, it's not fair game. So you have to be there and be ready to take it. But let me encourage you. I think we just broke open the cage, and so it's open. The glass cage has been loosened and is there for everyone now to go after it and go for it. So we'll be watching your movements.
My name is Tawfiq Rahim. I'm MPP1 from Canada. I don't want to be Prime Minister. Thank you very much for your speech. You spoke a little bit about the problems of governance, genocide, other types of mismanagement in Africa. You find yourself today in a country which is the harbinger of democracy and freedom to the world. In a few days' time, you'll have leaders from all over Africa speaking to the General Assembly. What do you think the role, though, is of African leaders themselves, like yourself, in promoting or pushing for or speaking out about democracy, human rights, and governance in other countries? And specifically, I could mention Omar Bashir's Sudan and Robert Mugabe's Zimbabwe.
I think Africa has to recognize the wrongs in its own midst and have to be courageous enough to admit it. When I speak to the General Assembly on tomorrow afternoon, I will say that Darfur is a shame on the conscience of the world, and that something ought to be done there. That's all we need to do. And, the African leadership is a small, closed, collegiate club where sometimes it's difficult for them to criticize each other. But I think enough enlightened leaders have been speaking out on issues in the continents where wrongs have been perpetrated. And certainly this woman's going to speak out.
Good evening, Ms. President. My name is Zach Newman. I'm an MPP1 here at the Kennedy School. I noticed in your speech tonight that the name of Charles Taylor was kind of noticeably absent. I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit about the legitimacy of the proceedings of the international justice community against him right now, if you view those as being legitimate, and secondly, what role those are playing in the, let's say, reconciliation of Liberia.
You know, that was purposeful. We're trying to forget it. You know, there's been a lot of talk about the legitimacy of the International Court. But I also think that the United Nations has long ago established the fact that there are supernatural considerations that when nations themselves fail to observe the standards, international standards, and fail to protect their own people, that there is a body, and that body is the is the United Nations, that has the supernatural powers to be able to do something about it. And the special court is in that interest. It's not the first time it's happened. And so a decision was taken, a resolution was passed with the participation of most of the members of the UN. It's not, there's also the court in Tanzania for the Rwanda genocide. And, you know, the International Court of Justice in The Hague is there to be able to deal with those persons who do not respect the rights of their own citizens. Where state terrorism is an issue, then there has to be a body to deal with it. And that's what this is all about. And so there can be legal arguments in which I don't have any qualification to join about whether those supernatural bodies are fully legal and can exercise rights on a national basis. But I think the acceptance of the world that this is the way to go to protect people from their own, from the excesses of their own, is the only way to ensure that we have a world in which people can enjoy international standards and freedoms. Was that all?
Hello, my name is Jessica Reitz. I'm an MPP1 here at the Kennedy School, and I want first and foremost to thank you for all the work you are doing, because it's truly remarkable, and those of us who are interested in spreading democracy throughout Africa really admire everything you're doing. My question is regarding child soldiers, actually. You spoke a lot about education, but I wanted to know more about how your administration is addressing the problem and reintegrating those thousands of children back into your economy as productive members of society.
About education, right?
Beyond education, yeah.
What are we doing about it?
Mm-hmm.
In the first instance, we've got to rehabilitate, rebuild the schools. I mean, schools have been totally destroyed across the country, and so we're in that process of just trying to get them back. And then with the teachers, how are we going to attract teachers or train teachers? We're talking about trying to train enough teachers to be able to man the schools all over the country. It's going to be a difficult task in rural areas where there are no homes, there are, very few medical facilities and things like that. But we're moving in that direction. We hope that when schools resume in just about a week, that we're going to try as much as possible, assuming the facilities are there, to move toward enforcing universal primary education by dealing with families to say that they have to get their children off the streets, where the low petty traders right now, helping the families to earn an income. How do we get them off the streets and into schools? It's a tremendous task because it takes so much. It's not just the school building, the teachers, the instruction material, the income of the parents to be able to, to meet the requirements of the school. It's a multifaceted thing, and we're not going to solve it overnight. We can only start with a program that covers several years and make sure that we make progress year after year. We expand the enrollment, and we enable more and more people to have access to education.
Madam President, Yakuna, good evening. My name is Isaac Bantu. I'm a Liberian, a former fellow of the Human Rights Program at Harvard University, and former Nima fellow as well. I have 2 quick questions for you. One is, next month, about 10,000 Liberians will be out of status. In your meeting in April in Rhode Island, you spoke to Congressman candidate Jack Reed and the rest to help Liberians. Has there been any good response from them to that effect? Last question, how much work has been done on issue of security in Liberia? Tell us some of the forces still around in the country for fact. How much work has been done on that?
On the first question, we still continue to work with members of the Congress on the question of the temporary protective status and hope that they will consider extending it for some time to Liberians to give them an opportunity to complete some of the things they're doing. Also gave us an opportunity to prepare to receive them at home. If we got 200,000 Liberians returning tomorrow, we wouldn't know how to cope, quite frankly. So we'll continue to work with them on that. When it comes to the security situation, yes, you are right, and that's the reason for the total dismantling of the security forces to try to rid it of, those elements that have represented the repression and the subjugation of people and the violence and all of that created us problems. Of course, you realize there's a consequence when you dismantle security forces, because unemployed security people who have been accustomed to, to kill and to harm and whatnot get restless, and they could cause danger and help to undermine the stability of the state. So we have to grapple with that too and see what we can come up with to direct and redeploy them in other areas where they too can have a peace dividend, so that they don't become disruptive of some of the things we're trying to do. And we're right in the midst of trying to find that balance, trying to find alternative, activities for them so that they do not become a serious problem for us. But it is right now a problem, has been reached unmanageable proportions, but it is a problem. Thank you, Isaac. We know you from way back there.
Hello. My name is David Senge, and I'm from Sierra Leone. I have two quick questions. First of all, we all agree that positive international cooperation leads to development and the opportunities which you have described. So I would like you to kindly tell us which specific strategies you have put in place with regards to the relationship Liberia has with Sierra Leone. The second question is, also Sierra Leone faces most of the dismal conditions which you described there. And then you gladly spoke about the poverty reduction strategy. Sierra Leone also has its own poverty reduction strategy. I was wondering if you had plans, you and the leaders of Sierra Leone and around the region, to have a united poverty reduction strategy, not only for your countries, but for the region as a whole. Thank you.
We're trying to promote regional cooperation and integration. As you know, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea are part of what we call the Mono River Union. We're trying to reactivate and strengthen the union so that we look at the scope and potential for regional cooperation. And I meet with President Kaba all the time, and we talk about it. The Secretariat has just been reactivated so that it can look at the potential for the type of cross-border activities, that will promote regional mobility and regional trade and all of that. So we hope that will work and strengthen it. Is there a regional poverty reduction strategy plan? Not yet. Each country is doing its own. After that, within the context of whatever plans there are for regional cooperation, then maybe one can move to that level. We're just starting our process. Sierra Leone is a bit ahead of us. They had peace before we did. But we'll get there once we've got our national policies and strategies right, and we see how we integrate it into a sub-regional effort.
Good evening. Thank you very much for coming and for your beautiful speech. My name is Will Rubin, and I'm a freshman at the college here. You mentioned that your democratic visions offered a renewed sense of hope to your citizens. I'm wondering what you believe a realistic future for other democratic visions in Africa as a whole would be in the years and decades to come.
Oh, I really think the future for the majority of African countries are good. I'm just excited by some of the changes and progress that have been made. You wouldn't, to go back to the example that would use, you wouldn't have dared in Africa 10 years ago to talk about taking a sitting president to court for atrocities. That would never have happened. Just see how far we've come in accepting the fact that there are international standards and norms to which all countries must be subjected. And so, we still have problems. There's still exceptions out there, and they need to be addressed over time. But I think if you look at many of the countries, across the African continent, you see that there's a big change. And like I said, that's being fueled also by global realities and global technological advances. That's forcing accountability and transparency and better policies. So it's happening.
We have time for 2 more questions, so we will take this question and the question over here.
President Sirleaf, thanks for coming. If the American experience in Liberia is one of our first attempts at state building, and one that ended in civil war, do you have any advice for us now that we have armies in 2 countries where we're attempting something similar?
I missed that. What was that?
You want to repeat your question?
I didn't get it.
So I'm just wondering if America's experience in Liberia, an experience of state building, devolved into civil war, do you have any advice from that experience that we might sort of bring to use in our experience now in Iraq and Afghanistan?
I think we need to do much more to prevent conflict. I think we need to do more to open societies, to allow everybody to feel like they have a stake, to avoid marginalization of any group, so that there is equal opportunity and everybody know that they do have a stake in the future. Our problems come from the marginalization of certain groups in the society for too long a period. The same thing applies to Iraq or Afghanistan or many of the other countries that have degenerated into conflict. So it's just a question of not waiting for it to be remedied, but creating those conditions that will prevent that. I hope the lessons that come from all of these conflict countries will enable us to do things differently, not only as nations, but also as international organizations such as the UN.
Last question.
Madam President, James Padilla de Borst, former Deputy Director of the Christian Health Association of Liberia and a student here at the Kennedy School, and also the adoptive father of a Liberian refugee. You've talked a lot about the many challenges facing the nation, but what specifically could we expect from your administration as far as efforts to bridge the gap, the traditional gap between the ethnicities, the tribal ethnicities, and the Liberian elite in Monrovia?
Equal opportunity for all, making sure there's no difference in a society. Equal access to benefits, equal access to protection. Don't forget that there's been intermarriages and all of that over time. You don't have the kinds of small elitism that we had, and we also have had successive types of domination by a particular ethnic group. We have a historical one, we have a more recent one. I think all of this have brought about a certain commonness, and certainly the war was a great equalizer. Everybody suffered in the war, no matter what your ethnic was. So we hope that that provides a common thread and enables us to build on the future of unity, and reconciliation. Can we take a few more?
5 minutes. I think we need to. Well, you want to take one more question? One more question. One question.
Tenacity. I could have just walked away. I want to say, I never thought I would say this, but you're the most beautiful president I've ever seen in my life. My name's Brother Jeff. I'm from Denver, Colorado, and I'm here with Josie Heath and Lauren Castile with the Council on Foundations Conference, and we were able to attend through Swanee Hunt, so this has been a great treat. Noticing the flags and the common history, many Liberians are also, in many regards, African American. What is the relationship with African Americans with Liberia? Is there a possibility for dual citizenship? And then also, what role are foundations playing in the development and the ongoing work of the country.
Issue for dual citizenship keeps coming up. There are a few lawyers that are looking at the implications of that, the possibilities of that. Hasn't yet reached, say, the policy formulation stage. We haven't, but it's being talked about. We'll see what other countries that have gone through that process, such as Ghana, what has been the implications, what have been the benefits, and the costs associated there too. And if it does have some, some useful sides to it, then we'll consider it. We haven't reached there yet. What's the other one?
The role of community foundations and philanthropy in terms of the rebuilding of Liberia.
Already we have, community groups, international non-governmental groups that are working in their different areas of interest, forming partnerships with local institutions and just helping to respond to basic community needs, whether it's in education or health, or some other area of endeavor. And those are part of what I mentioned as strategic partnerships, and we continue to welcome that.
Every so often we have here in the forum at the Kennedy School someone who embodies in person everything that we stand for. Intelligence, training, the courage to engage in politics, compassion, and great, great bravery. Please join me in thanking President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf for being that person.